r/Nosleep. Posted by you/thatonecityinchina. I'm a dumpster diver, and I've found some strange things in my dives. Part 2. Hi Nosleep, it's Charlie again. I didn't expect so many of you guys to be interested in the weird junk I'd found over the years. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, feel free to check out my last post here. I'm more than happy to share more stories of things I've come across that have particularly freaked me out. A lot of memories I had repressed seem to be resurfacing as I clean up my garage. I could go into detail about the rocking chair that rocks on its own, or the Furby that I picked up from a yard sale that is most definitely haunted, but today, I'm going to be telling you about a strange television I found back in my college years. I mentioned in my last post that college move-out dates are a godsend for dumpster diving, and I stand by that. I used to room near a wealthy, private university that rhymes with kale, where students are either secured by trust funds or are incredibly intelligent. I've witnessed my fair share of entitled, wealthy 20-something-year-olds casually throwing out mini fridges, vacuums, and televisions onto the curbside for the garbage men to pick up. Fun fact, over the years, I've amassed a collection of mini fridges currently sitting in my basement, each stocked with a different brand of beer. It's probably the best thing I own. Plus, the Dyson vacuum cleaner I picked up from a sorority mansion still works perfectly well. Now, I didn't go to this particular university, mostly because I couldn't afford it even if I was smart enough to get in, and also because I was definitely not smart enough to get in. But I did go to a pretty decent state school nearby, where I roomed with 3 different guys in a house specifically set aside for student living. Reggie, Max, and Jake were my roommates all throughout college because we happened to click pretty well. The 3 of us had similar interests, similar majors, and similar irregular sleep schedules. I'm proud to say that I was the one who introduced them to dumpster diving, and the rest was pretty much history. We still make an effort to hang out every year. Every summer, the rich kids would dump a bunch of stuff outside, and so we spent those warm summer nights combing through the streets and loading up Reggie's pickup truck with microwaves, dressers, storage bins, and futons. Sorority houses were good targets for things like Palm Pilots and butterfly chairs. Frat houses supplied boomboxes and Walkmans. We had no shame and absolutely all the time in the world. We'd head to the campus dorms in the middle of the night to grab the discarded frozen foods in the dumpsters behind the dorms. The amount of microwavable foods thrown out by wasteful college students was enough to feed a small village. We managed to survive off frozen veggies, instant rice, Eggo waffles, Totinos, and Hot Pockets for a month. Our house was a strange amalgamation of various things we had picked up from the streets and the bins, but we made it work and we had a good time. Of course, not everything we picked up was good, and the television was a prime example. It was a hot day in August, and we were vegging out on the couch. We were stoned out of our minds and munching down on some pizza rolls and Snickers we found in the bin of an Aldi's when Reggie burst through the front door. "Kappa Psi has a TV outside their house," he yelled. "Oh, shit." We were tired of watching television through the tiny retro TV we found in the dumpster of an electronics store, and none of us were truly satisfied with the grainy quality of the TV. We looked all summer for a decent television, but in that particular summer, the TV supply was dry. Luckily, Reggie had spotted the TV on his way back from his shift at Sonic, but it was too big for him to load by himself. Back in those days, televisions were bulky and heavy, flat screens weren't really a thing yet. I, the most sober between me, Jake, and Max, clambered into Reggie's truck and accompanied him to the Kappa Psi house, where the television sat gloriously on the curb, as if it was waiting for us. We had struck gold, or so we thought. As we struggled to load the TV into the back of Reggie's truck, a brother from the house came out, holding a can of beer and looking confused. "You guys, need help?" he called, leaning against the porch railing. Reggie and I looked at each other, but I was too blazed to come up with a response. "We're good. I think." "Sorry, didn't mean to scare you. I saw you guys taking the TV and figured if you were gonna take it, you might as well take the remote, too." "All good, dude. Actually, while you're here, do you know if this thing still works?" I asked, tapping the screen. "I mean, yeah, it still works well. But apparently it's a little wonky." The brother shrugged, fishing the remote out from his pocket. One of the brothers insisted we toss it out. "What's wrong with the TV?" Reggie asked. "I'm not really sure, it honestly seems fine to me. All I know is, the guy who owned it said that shit was haunted. And then he dropped out of school to check himself into a psych ward. But it's all yours if you want." With that, he tossed us the remote that went with the TV and went back inside. We glanced at each other for a moment, shrugged and loaded the TV onto the car. What do you think he meant by wonky? Reggie wondered as we drove off. And a psych ward? Really? The guy probably watched a horror movie and it was too much for his fragile, sheltered brain. You know, Kappa's eyes full of dumb rich kids. I really didn't care about the guy's warning. All my stoned, primal mind could think of was free TV. We spent a good hour hooking the TV up to the corner, trying to make sense of the wires and cables. But we were finally able to get a picture on the screen after struggling for a bit, and it was glorious. Good color picture was hard to come by in those days, so this was a huge win. I went to the microwave to make more munchies while Max, Reggie, and Jake fiddled with the TV. Man, this TV has so many channels. Max said, flipping through various shows and static. The lower numbered channels were your typical news channels and sitcoms. As the channels went higher and higher, the shows became more and more unfamiliar. We caught glimpses of Spanish soap operas, auctions, infomercials, and Asian reality shows. Then something strange happened. Without warning, the channel numbers skipped from the 150s to the 400s. Confused, we continued to surf through various staticky channels until we got to channel 444. It just so happened to be airing The Joy of Painting in what was considered full HD at the time. But something was off. A man took a seat in front of the canvas, surrounded by a pitch-black background. He looked like Bob Ross. He had the afro, beard, fitted jeans, and the blue button-down. But when he turned to face the cameras, you could tell he was clearly not Bob. He donned the classic Bob Ross perma-smile as he began to mix the paint on his palette, slowly wiggling the brush around. The only colors on his palette were various shades of red and a blob of black paint. Soothing music filled the background. "Welcome to the joy of painting. Where none of us are mistakes," he muttered. He had a vague accent, perhaps Russian? Just happy little accidents. The man began to paint, but the scenery he was painting was not at all serene. Instead of the peaceful orange sunset he was using as a reference, he began to draw an unhappy face in blood red paint. "I don't want to draw a sunset today. Sometimes, we don't have to draw what's expected of us," he mused. "Sometimes, we can do whatever the fuck we want." "Since when did Bob Ross drop F-bombs?" I asked, shocked at the sudden change of tone. Everyone shrugged. "Use absolutely no pressure," he said. "Just like an angel's wing," he said. "Well, where was that when I was young, father? Where?" The man's smile and volume reached an uncomfortable intensity as he began grinding his teeth, to the point where his gums began to bleed. "You can do anything you want in this world. Artists are allowed to be different. That's what he said. Once you help everyone around you get what they want. Isn't that right? Isn't that right?" His painting became increasingly erratic and the pressure on the brush increased. The bristles of the brush began to break down as fake Bob smashed it against the canvas, with no care for the end result. "I helped everyone. Everyone in my life. They said, 'We want happy paintings. If you want sad things, watch the news.' Watch the news? Well, I watched the news, and I didn't like it. I didn't fucking like it." Fake Bob screamed, crying and hyperventilating. The painting was no longer reminiscent of anything remotely close to a sunset. It was a haphazard mess of erratic brushstrokes and madness. You could see the whites of fake Bob's knuckles as he mashed the brush until the bristles spread out into a messy fan. The chaotic scene finally climaxed into fake Bob throwing his palette at the canvas and smearing it across the canvas, creating an ugly, angry mess of black and red. "You can do anything you want to do. This is your world," fake Bob whispered, a mess of tears and snot as he tossed the palette and marched off screen. "Either we're smoking some weird shit, or that's not Bob Ross," Jake blinked, sufficiently freaked out. I mean, you all saw that, right? It's not Bob Ross, dumbass." Max rolled his eyes as he pressed the button on the TV to skip to channel 445. "Probably just an independent movie with a political message, I don't know. In any case, the dude's got issues," Reggie remarked, clearly a little freaked out. The next channel featured what looked like a grayscale Barney and Friends if Barney suffered from serious budget cuts. In fact, this didn't look like a typical episode at all. A man in a dirty, beat-up Barney mascot costume sat on a bench, lighting a cigarette between his purple paws. The show then cut to a shot of a group of children walking up to Barney, holding their arms out. As if this wasn't unsettling enough, a simple camera zoom showed that the children weren't kids at all. They were short adults dressed up in children's clothes, hairstyled in pigtails and bowl cuts to resemble the children on the set of Barney. They all looked exhausted and terrified. The background music constituted of 2 piano notes being played on repeat. Barney hugged each of them one by one. "Hello children," he said. The voice was exactly the same as the voice of fake Bob Ross. "Hi, Barney," they all mused in unison. A woman in braids and a frayed pink dress was the last one to approach Barney, arms visibly bruised and shaking. The rest of the children stood silently in a line behind Barney. "What are we learning today, Mr. Barney?" she asked, voice low and trembling. I noticed she also had a vague Russian accent. The Barney took off his mask, revealing the same man who was playing Bob Ross in the earlier channel. The man looked more haggard this time, with no afro and beard. A 5 o'clock shadow replaced the Bob Ross beard, and a receding hairline replaced the afro. He took a long drag from his cigarette before putting the butt out on the girl's arm. "Today we are learning about manners," fake Barney replied as the girl winced. "It is good manners for a woman to never complain, like Natalia here. Natalia is a good girl because she listens to Barney and does not whine like other women do." He put the head of Barney back on, and the music suddenly changed to a more joyful arrangement as he led the children to a playground for their lesson. One man, however, did not follow the rest of the group. Barney turned slowly, watching Dmitri fidget in place. "Dmitri, what are you doing?" Barney asked, voice gruff and impatient. "Come here." I cannot do this anymore," Dmitri said, and he began going off on a rant in Russian. The other children looked shocked and huddled together as Barney walked towards him. Barney put his paws on Dmitri's shoulders. Dmitri flinched. "This was not part of deal, Dmitri. You are being a bad friend." Dmitri shook his head and admonished fake Barney in Russian. Barney shook his head, as if he couldn't believe what was going on. He shushed Dmitri by caressing his face and his paws, saying something back in Russian. Then he slapped him across the face. Dmitri fell to the floor, and Barney reached into his costume and pulled out a revolver. It all happened so quickly. Before we could even react, the camera quickly cut to the horrified expression of the other children as we heard multiple gunshots go off. By the time the gunshots stopped, the camera cut back to Dmitri, who was now depicted as a blow-up doll with multiple bullet holes, dressed in Dmitri's clothing and surrounded by a pool of blood. "What the actual fuck?" I exclaimed. I heard Reggie whimper. I changed my mind. "Today's lesson will be about obedience and being a good friend," Barney said joyfully. "Bad friends who do not obey good friends who help them will never make it far in life." We should have just shut off the TV then and there, but the TV wouldn't let us turn it off. Max left the room, muttering about how he needed to find a new weed dealer. Jake covered his eyes and groaned about how he was scarred for life. Reggie and I tried manually turning the TV off, but it would not turn off, let alone change channels. The sobbing cast began to tentatively sing and dance to the classic Barney and Friends "I Love You, You Love Me" ending song, but in Russian. As they approached the end of the song, the scene abruptly cut to a circle of blow-up dolls vaguely dressed up in the children's clothes and wigs, lying on the floor with abandon. The Barney kicked around the blow-up dolls for a moment before crawling close to the camera, purple mask filling up the frame. "And remember, friends," fake Barney said, beady mask eyes looking directly into the camera. "I love you." We desperately tried to change the channel, hoping to go back down to PBS documentaries and ABC sitcoms. But the TV wouldn't let us go down. With every click of the remote, the channels only went up and up. Each channel featured the same man every time, parodying famous sitcoms and movies. We saw the man drowning in a kiddie pool as Jack from Titanic, holding the hand of a blow-up doll meant to be Rose. The same man posed as a news anchor in a disheveled suit and messy wig, reporting on what looked to be the Chernobyl nuclear incident. There was a Sesame Street-esque show where dirty sock puppets with googly eyes seemed to be reciting random Russian words in unison. There was even a Christmas movie parody, with the man painted completely in green and acting as the Grinch. Each channel that followed became increasingly unsettling, if that was even possible. But the last channel was probably the worst of all. Just when we thought there was no end in sight, the TV would not let the channels go any higher. The actor was staring directly into our eyes, wearing an all-black bodysuit that covered the tip of his forehead all the way down to his toes. "You do not enjoy my performances," he lamented. "But why? Is he talking to us?" Jake Whisper yelled. "Of course it's channel fucking 666, Reggie sighed. "Why wouldn't it be? You changed channel, you try to turn off TV, even though I try so hard to entertain you. You are rude. I know you watch. I know you see me." We sat in silence as the man went off on an angry Russian rant. We didn't know what to do at this point. The TV wouldn't turn off, and the channels wouldn't cooperate, either. We felt somewhat entranced by this strange Russian man putting on a one-man show. "Even if you ignore me, I will be heard. I will not be silenced. I will be seen." With that, he reached his lanky fingers to his face, where he began to pull on his bottom eyelids. He stretched out his eyelids until they began to rip from his face, groaning and sobbing the entire time. His tears mixed in with the blood pouring out from his eyes. His long, dirty fingernails tore his face apart, revealing the muscles and even bone underneath. Jake started yelling obscenities as we fruitlessly tried to turn off the TV. "Is this enough for you? Is it?" he wailed as he grabbed a knife off screen. But before we could watch him plunge the knife into his temple, Max emerged from his room and threw his old boombox at the television. The TV sparked a few times, static filling the screen, until it finally conked out. A crack filled the corner of the TV where the boombox hit it. The man's agonized screams broke up as the screen finally became black and everything was silent. We all looked at each other, jaws dropped and eyes wide with fear. We had literally just witnessed a man rip his face off, and if it weren't for Max we may have been witnesses to an actual suicide. We sat in total silence, trying to digest everything we had just seen. "Any chance that was fake?" Reggie asked softly, breaking the silence. "I don't know, but I know for a fact that I'm never smoking again," Jake declared. The next day, everything seemed to be back to normal. The television started to play regular channels again, albeit with a visible crack. We were overly cautious with the TV afterwards, never going beyond channel 15 in fear of being transported to those weird channels again. As for what happened afterwards, we actually ended up becoming the source of one of the most infamous urban legends in the college, the owners of the weird TV from Kappa Psi. Sure, we were traumatized for a while, but at the very least, we had an interesting story to tell at parties. And the quality of the TV was too good to just pass up. And yeah, any normal person would have thrown the TV away, but we pretty much only had 3 brain cells between the 4 of us and figured what had happened was a one-time thing that would never happen again. And luckily, we were right. We continued to use the TV throughout our college years and that man never appeared ever again, nor did any of his freaky knockoff shows. We even managed to find a cheap DVD player at a thrift store that we hooked up to the TV. But I could definitely see why the original owner of the TV dropped out of school and checked into a ward. As we graduated and all went our separate ways, we debated tossing the TV or saddling it with one of us. I volunteered to keep the TV for memory's sake and took it with me. The TV was then buried under hockey sticks and old blankets in the corner of my garage. I had pushed most of my college years out of my brain, but the memories of that summer night came flooding back once I laid eyes on the cracked screen. I dragged the TV out from the corner to throw it out. It was still as gargantuan and cracked as it was in college. I half expected it to turn on and start playing those weird shows again, but nothing like that happened. As I pushed the TV out onto the curbside, I hoped no one but the garbage truck would try and grab this haunted TV from the early 2000s from the sidewalk. Out of sheer curiosity, I decided to hit up my old roommates about the television for old time's sake. I texted them a picture of the TV on the sidewalk as I walked back into the house, caption "finally throwing this thing out." I didn't check on my phone until after dinner that night, but when I opened my phone I was flooded with worried messages from the boys, telling me to look closely at the picture I had sent. In the corner of the screen of the TV, I could just barely make out the silhouette of a pale man in a black bodysuit, the same bodysuit that the man wore as he tore his face apart. I immediately ran out to check on the TV, but it was no longer on the sidewalk where I'd left it.